Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, let's step out from debate land for 10 seconds and realize that if you are hampas lupa and poorest of the poor, it might not be the best idea to go and sue Big Pharma. That's just the reality of how the world works. But, as what my partner mentioned, which we got little to no response to coming from the previous speaker, is that that's exactly the point in which these poor people or disenfranchised individuals on an individual level can decide whether or not they're going to push for a civil or criminal case against the bad guy. Or if they were to collectivize through class action to be able to stick it to the man because these people took our homes, it allows them a chance to be able to get better lawyers and really understand the capacity of what they're getting into. The heart of my partner's case was about how a lot of these things are emotionally charged. In fact, when closing opposition also talks about how, we have to be able to fight and have a chance to be able to win, etc., we completely agree, and we think it's exactly on our side that we're able to understand the reality when we know that they have more to lose. There are three fundamental questions my partner and I successfully answer versus the other teams. Number one, what change does the ruling do? And this resolves both OG and OO, who tried to talk about not wanting to spam the system and at the same time allowing individuals capacity and chance to do things. My partner talked to you exclusively about how having more to lose puts a weight on that and allows people to have a better chance at understanding it. Number two, what exactly are the unique benefits of ER or English rule versus AR or American rule? And what is the comparative? Why is status quo kind of shit? Because most of status quo is pretty much the American rule. And number three, what benefits do we really unlock from the individual? But more importantly, something opening didn't talk about, the criminal justice system as a whole, for process in general, and for lawyers, judges, and jurors, of which happen upstream to opening deadlock, real talk. But before that, let's respond to a couple of things from the previous speaker. The first thing they say is, poor individuals no longer have a capacity to fight the good fight against the bigger bad guys, and lawyers are kinda not incentivized to help these poor people. I have a couple of responses. A, on both sides, you have pro bono lawyers, of which have quotas to be able to help the poor. B, we think it allows lawyers the capacity to be able to select cases at a point in which it becomes risky. Because, last time I checked, lawyers aren't capitalist pigs. In fact, they're aware that mahirap tong profession. It's really more of a vocation to be able to stand for lady justice. It becomes more of an informed decision. C, my POI. On both sides, they get paid. It's just that the winner or loser pay. But if the response is, Joseph, the poor are not going to be able to pay, they get wrecked. Bro, you're the world's worst shitty lawyer if you don't know how to do due diligence. In fact, it becomes an emotionally charged decision. Wherein if you're a lawyer and you go to like a poor area and you're like, guys, tutulungan kayong lahat without having to understand if you can pay me back or not on both sides, then you really have to do some due diligence at a point in which you take this case even knowing people can't get paid back. Fifth and most importantly, it's on our side of the house where that disenfranchised individual or group of people are able to know what they're willing to be able to take. And this response to their other argument about 50-50 does the same thing. No, the comparative is very simple. If it's 50-50, you feel like if you win or if you lose, it's the same outcome. But when you begin with the end in mind and you look at the worst case of you winning, you understand the math of it that you have to pay double. You have to pay not just your fees and the other party's fees. It might be small to a rich guy that opening kind of talks about, but we also think that it affects the poorest of the poor, who you also claim are sensitive to be able to understand these capacities to be able to pay. Meaning, whether that's 10,000 pesos that might be small to an average person, it's a lot to them, even to the point that they have to take like a class action for those particular things. Ultimately, we think that closing is motivated by like the right thing, but ultimately, it lacks the understanding and comparative to what it specifically does to the ruling. Specifically, when we have the English rule as opposed to the American rule, it pushes people to know that if they lose, you have to pay more. That is different from 50-50 because in status quo, you don't feel that severity. You don't feel that economic impact. But the point in which you're like, oh no, kung talo tayo, I'll pay more, it becomes an incentive structure not just for you, but also to push your lawyer to be able to do a better job. It also pushes the system, the jurors and the judges to take things seriously. And that was the impact of my partner, wherein he talked about it's not just about individual choice and agency, but looking at the system as a whole for people to be like, oh shit, if we accept the bribe or we make thing bahala na, there's more to lose for the losing party. So, if in status quo, people foam in the mouth and get angry because they lose, more people, even to a larger extent, are going to get further affected exactly at the point in which they have even more to lose because it's double than that. That's the unique case you get. Why do we win compared to everyone else? We win against closing because we responded to them. We win against our diagonal opening up because we flipped what they told you and we told you that it's exactly what motivates us, that we want these very people you care about to be able to be helped. And you win against our opening because we don't just take a narrow case and say, we decongest the courts, we help people. But upstream and regardless of that, we look at the perspective of due process and the law, which on either side, regardless of input being corrupt or not, being more or not, it allows you a capacity to be able to have a chance to win, given the three scenarios my partner talked about, which quite cleanly really explain how things go. If you think that you're winning, you fight the good fight. If you're unsure and kind of mid, you make that decision to be able to go or not, therefore being more informed. And most importantly, the worst case, if you think you're losing and wala na, it doesn't become emotionally charged, it becomes a bit more rational and ultimately allows you the capacity to be able to cut your losses and settle against the comparative of 50-50, wherein more emotions are likely to come into play and you kind of think na, kaya ko to. But in reality, you lose and that harms you even more. In order to have a better system for people, for lawyers, and for the world, we think the English rule is the way to go. The more you have at stake, the bigger the magnitude and the more proportional and fair the action. We are very proud to take this from CG.